Hello and welcome to Reps to GOG. My name is Michael, and today we're going to be talking about Summoner for the PlayStation 2. Summoner was one of the few RPGs that the American PS2 launch would see. It was one of the first titles that Volition, now known as Deep Silver, would release with THQ as the publisher. If you were to glance at Volition's previous projects, you may notice that Summoner would be their maiden voyage into RPGs, and boy, were they shooting for the stars. Simply put, Summoner is a fully built and immensely dense CRPG crammed into a lithe and sleek PS2 body. If you've ever played something like Baldur's Gate, you know exactly what you're getting into. A party of adventurers who are commanded by the player in real-time tactical combat, a world bursting at the seams with mystical lore, and more than aplenty NPC in need of your services. You are playing the role of Joseph, a young man who happens to bear a special mark on his left hand. This is the mark of the Summoner. You are the Summoner, but that's not important right now. What's important is that your little village is currently under siege. Your home is burning to the ground, and all you can do is procure a sword and manage an escape. Remember this sight. Familiarize yourself with it, for the path of the Summoner is one wrought with destruction, misery, and demise. A burning town is honestly a great tool for teaching you the mechanics of a game about killing things. Summoner is not a game that holds your hand. The few things that need to be taught via tooltips are here in the tutorial and only here. As you walk amongst the burning rubble, you'll get a system message that says, NPCs with an exclamation point have important things to say. Make sure you listen to every word. If you do not heed this message's advice, you will not succeed at this game. I'll explain why later. The next system message is about doing chain attacks. If you ignore this message's advice, you might succeed, but the game will be significantly harder. Combat in Summoner is command-based. You have Joseph selected, you tell him to go hit a thing, and then he proceeds to go hit the thing. It hits you back, voila, combat. Chain attacks serve as the heroic flourish that pushes our adventurers beyond the skills of your normal soldier or henchman. What if instead of your opponent hitting you back, you could just hit him again? That's a chain attack. By pressing one of the directional pad buttons as you go to swing your sword, you're able to do extra attacks before your opponent gets to swing at you again. This can be done as many times as you please as long as you keep hitting your active reloads on time.
Yeah.
However, for every successive chain attack, the timing window gets smaller and smaller. Besides chain attacks, the combat is relatively simple and gives you pretty good control over your character. You can cast spells with the circle button and use physical skills by pressing the square button. While this may seem pretty slow going right off the bat, your party is going to effectively quintuple in size going forward, so you'll have plenty of spells and skills to juggle should you choose to do so. Once you finish the tutorial, you'll end up going to a city called Lanell. This city will not only serve as your home base for a portion of this game, but it also serves as a representative slice of the game's ego, its soul. Much like Lanell, Summoner is huge, difficult to navigate, and unforgiving. If you're not paying attention to what NPCs are saying, you are not progressing. If you're not keeping up with your armor on all your characters, you're not progressing. If you didn't bring a slashing type weapon to this area that happens to have a bunch of enemies who are immune to stabbing type weapons, your rogue is just going to do no damage. As the Boy Scouts of America say, the first rule of survival is to be prepared. And with Summoner, you won't always know what dangers lie before you. There are no map markers and you can't write on your map, so you'll have to keep a keen eye and meticulous notes. This was a bit frustrating for me at first, but because I retreaded a lot of ground trying to do side quests, I remembered where important NPCs were pretty fast. There is a slight problem with the game being so huge though. As I stated before, this is a full-blown CRPG on the PS2. There are a few variables at play because of this. Not only was the PS2 new technology at the time, but THQ wanted Volition to rush to get it out the door for the release window. While the level design is very nice looking, it's often obstructed by a sliding view radius around your character. Summoner also suffers from really frequent frame rate issues, with the game sometimes chugging to the point where it's actually hard to control. However, there were only a few portions of the game where my body was physically revulsed by this. That said, when the locale isn't packed with objects and particle effects, the game is a treat to play. During combat, there's almost always something that I feel like I need to do. Cast a rebuff, position an area of effect spell, try to get a backstab with my rogue, and it keeps everything fun and exciting. Unfortunately, micromanaging your team comes at the cost of some of the power progression that you're expected to do in the game. While Summoner does have a traditional experience system to push your characters along, there are also a few other systems for gaining skills. Those mainly include raising your summoning power by wearing summoning rings to gain more summons, and gaining new skills to use as chain attacks by using chain attacks frequently. These leveled up chain attack skills you get are really powerful. I'm talking elemental damage, AoE crowd control type powerful. However, you gain extra chain attacks by spamming chain attacks in combat. If you were trying to get this one in particular, you would have to spam the kick for an indeterminate amount of time until you unlock a new chain attack. By itself, this system is fine, but I feel like it's in direct opposition to the party-based combat system, where you're pretty consistently meant to be switching between party members to keep buffs up, reposition, etc. If I wanted to focus on training a singular character in my party, I'm basically doing less damage and making things harder for myself. I wish that you just gained extra skill chains as your character leveled up. My current philosophy with RPGs is that if a game is forcing you to do extra grinding, it has pacing problems. Whether it be the amount of random encounters you're getting or the difficulty ramping in the story, something is wrong. While the easy answer to this chain attack problem is to say, why don't you grind it with random encounters? I have two responses to that. One, I shouldn't have to, and two, well, let's just say there's a little bit of a loading problem in the game. The loading in Summoner takes a ridiculous amount of time out of your life. Every single time I would get into a random encounter or switch areas, I would cartoonishly pull out my phone and check my Twitter follows. If I was a completionist, I would absolutely hate this game for this. Okay, now let's take a break from talking about mechanics a bit and talk a little bit about the cast of characters. Joseph is the main character. He's also a child of prophecy and has the mark of the Summoner. He can wear most medium and heavy armor in the game and most melee weapons. He's also able to use summoning rings to summon various creatures to do his bidding. When you summon creatures, they act as a quasi-fifth party member. You can control them, but you have to summon them each time into battle, and they don't have gear. Fleece is a rogue assassin type party member. She uses medium armor and has the ability to backstab your opponents for extra damage if she's using a dagger type weapon. Rosalind is a mage/healer who's very squishy and can put a lot of points into different spells and buffs. And finally, Jakar, who is your knight-type character who builds the heaviest weapons and armor. Jakar is like a tank character who actually shares a lot of characteristics with Joseph, with minor differences in gear. Joseph's summoning abilities are pretty cool, and you unlock them steadily. However, the selection of summons that you get unfortunately don't end up being super useful. While there are some cool ones that have interesting abilities, like the Wraith, who can drain levels from your opponent, most of them are just elementally typed melee guy. Also, if Joseph dies, the summoned monster will turn against your party. This is pretty cool considering the summoned monsters are not there of their own volition. Ha! Volition. Anyway, I love that there are actual stealth mechanics and differences in how you backstab people as Fleece. A backstab in combat will do a lot of extra damage, but a backstab from stealth outside of combat or against a knockdown opponent, tons of damage. Enough damage to instantly kill the enemy a lot of the time. I think they did a very good job of making the rogue feel fun in the video game, which not a lot of games do. Rosalind ends up being pretty interesting. By the end of the game, she has some pretty powerful spells in CC. Interestingly enough, you can give her a bow so she's not trying to run up and staff bash people and putting herself in harm's way when she runs out of mana, as she is the squishiest member on the team. Strangely enough, there's no way to get mana back in the game besides just waiting. You'd think that they'd add mana potions or something. That being said, a lot of the consumables are found to be wanting in my eyes. Potions exist as an oh shit button and are very underpowered regardless. Almost every potion in the game is just an item version of a spell you already have. In the case of healing potions, a spell that 3 of your party members already have. Scrolls of Revive are pretty useful early on before you get access to Rosalind or level your healing skill up enough on Joseph. Other than that, I just sat on a bunch of consumables because there was really never a situation where I cared enough to go into the menu and use them. Jakar was unfortunately not as interesting of a party member as the other 3. While he does get some alright mass crowd control toward the end of the game, you get him relatively late into the first act, he leaves your party for almost the entirety of the second act, and at this point in the game, he's pretty much just a slightly tankier version of Joseph. He can even heal and everything. If you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, you might be aware of the concept of action economy. To put it simply, the idea is that there is only a finite amount of things that a singular character can do within a specific period of time. In a party-based game, this exists as a balancing factor, so even if a higher level character were fighting a bunch of lower level creatures, it would still be pretty difficult for him by virtue of how many actions he can complete in a 6-second time frame versus how many actions the 5 goblins can complete in the same time frame. Very rarely will you be in danger of dying if you outnumber your opponents. Once you pretty frequently have 4 or 5 party members at a time, you'll notice that most enemies are clumped up in groups of 3 as you progress, and that if you only pull one group of enemies at a time, you'll pretty much never have any issues. You'll also experience the inverse of this during parts of the game where you have a limited party size for story reasons. There are portions of the game where you're expected to fight 3 or 4 enemies with a party of 2 or even 1. Unfortunately, this means you'll be jerked back and forth between, this feels a little too easy, and, I'm kinda getting my shit rocked right now. I'm not too terribly worried about the parts where the combat is hard, because the combat in the game is fun, and those portions of the game were where I really got to react and strategize. However, the parts where the combat is too easy, they kinda outweigh the fun difficulty spikes. Just to make sure you heard me correct earlier, I did refer to a first act. This game is long, it's also big and hard, whatever. Without spoiling too much, the basic idea of the game is that you need to collect a bunch of summoning rings to... Wait. Did I mention yet? It's literally impossible to look up anything for this game. Fuck SMT Devil Summoner, and Summoner's War in particular, for hogging all of the Summoner SEO on Google. What was I saying again? Oh yeah, summoning rings. So, your home nation is being invaded by a big evil dude, and you're told you need to collect 4 summoning rings to stop him. Let's just say things don't go your way. That's the end of the first act. I cannot be any less vague about this or even talk about the second or third acts without spoiling huge and interesting story beats. For those who don't care about spoilers, I will go ahead and give a brief overview of the story because it is pretty cool and I do want to talk about it. So Joseph's a farmer, a happy farmer. He also has the mark of the summoner. When he was a kid, his summoner powers went out of control and he accidentally summoned a demon who wiped out his tiny farming village in Medeva. Fast forward to now, and he's all grown up and has found another farming village to live in. However, as the game starts, this has been attacked by soldiers of Orenia, who are waging war with Medeva. An old priest named Iago helped you when you were younger to tame your summoner powers, and now you've been instructed to find him in Lanell. As you get to Lanell to meet him, you find out that he's inside the royal palace and has become an advisor to the king of Medeva. The thing about Lanell is that they really don't like poor people, especially poor farmers, which Joseph happens to be, so the royal guards won't let you in. A gutter snipe named Fleece overhears this happening and offers to help you out since she needs to sneak into the palace anyways for a job. This is your first party member. You sneak into the castle and meet Iago, who tells everyone you're chill, and tells you that you need to collect the 4 summoner rings. Fleece decides to join you because the man who took her in as a kid was poisoned by someone from something called the Jade Temple Society, and you agree to help her find out what happened. As you journey around and collect the 4 rings, you gain your 2 other party members. Rosalind, a priest who is being ordered to assist you in your journey against her will by her priestly order, and Jakar, a Medevan knight who is being ordered to help you by the king of Medeva. As you finally collect the last of the 4 rings, you go back and ask Iago what to do with them, only to find out that the king has been betrayed by one of his advisors and was sold out to Murad, the emperor of Orenia, in return for the throne. The only stipulation was that the summoner be killed. By this point, Murad had been sending out assassins after you left and right, so it's clear he's out to get you. You find Iago and he tells you to fuse all of the rings inside the forge underneath the Lanell Palace by placing them into the flame with your hand that bears the summoner's mark. You cut your way through occupying Orenian forces and eventually make it there. With trepidation, Joseph steps forward to cast the rings into the forge. Betrayal! Joseph screams in pain as the rings are destroyed alongside his left hand. Turns out, Iago was being possessed by the demon who you summoned on that fateful day in your home village. He hired Fleece to help you get the rings to him so that they could be destroyed and the demons that were bound to them would be freed, while also destroying the summoner's hand, as he's the only one who could stop the Orenian Emperor Murad and the demons from running rampant. Joseph gets imprisoned in Emperor Murad's tower in Orenia because once a summoner dies, a new one is born. Jakar stays with the now widowed and ousted Queen of Medivh, and Fleece and Rosalind plot to break Joseph out of jail. This is the end of Act 1. 3 months pass and now it's time for a prison heist. Fleece breaks into Murad's tower and frees Joseph. They're in Orenia now and Rosalind is waiting for them in Wolong. Wait, why are all the Orenian soldiers samurai? Oh, Orenia, Oriental, Medivh, Medieval. Gotcha. Anyway, you meet Rosalind in Wolong in secret. You see, Orenia is fucked because Murad fancies himself a god king and is taking over everything and murdering and enslaving everyone. In Wolong, you're introduced to a mystic who can heal your hand with a ritual. You need to gather a bunch of symbolic items, drink your own blood, go find some deadly poison, eat it all, and then dunk your arm into the pool of rejuvenation, or something like that. After all that, you finally get your arm back, but what can you do? Turns out there's actually 8 summoner rings, one for each finger, I guess. This is when you learn what it means to be a summoner. In the creation myth of the current world, there was a big war between the goddess who handles death and Urath, the most powerful god. Despite sparing the death goddess multiple times, the death goddess betrayed Urath and killed him, breaking him into 9 pieces. 4 demons to represent his conquering nature, 4 dragons to represent his law, and 1 summoner who represents him as a creator. The demons immediately waged a giant war against the dragons, which almost ended the war until the first summoner bound them into rings and sealed them away. So now, in order to combat the demons, you'll need to collect all 4 dragon rings. You collect 3, but guess who's got the 4th? Yeah, it's Murad. So now you gotta go kill the God King and collect the last dragon ring. Now you've gotta go to some ancient dwarf people and have them try to remake the demon rings so that you can seal away the demons who were unleashed. This is the end of Act 2. For the final act, you're rejoined by Jakar, and he's ready to help you fulfill your destiny. Everything in Medivh has been destroyed and inhabited by the demons: the priest temple, the dwarf city, the ancient temple, and Lanell. You'll first need to get the design documents for the ring. They were stolen by the advisor who usurped the Medivhan throne. You'll need to get into the city, but they expect the summoner, so they put up wards that stop him from coming in. For reasons I won't explain here, Fleece also can't come in. So you infiltrate Lanell with just Jakar and Rosalind so that you can kill the usurper and get the documents for the ring, all while taking down the ward. At this point you go back and the dwarves slowly make the rings for you as you slay and reseal the demons. At this point, only 1 demon remains, the demon who killed your village, the demon that possessed your mentor and betrayed you. Now it's your time to defeat him, but at this point you also learn more of the prophecy. You're meant to gather all of the rings and ascend to godhood. Once you kill the demon, will you rekindle the bonfire, or will you let the world live in darkness? Will you sacrifice yourself to ascend to godhood, or live out your days as the hero who bound the demons, perhaps leaving the threat to plague another generation? The ending is left pretty open-ended. You don't really know the ramifications of choosing either choice, but my personal read is that if you ascend to godhood, you're sacrificing yourself to remove the threat and temptation of the demons and dragons from the world permanently, where choosing to walk away is damning future generations to repeat these tragedies until another, more responsible summoner comes and fulfills the prophecy. But you get to live. One of the main points of contention in the story is that all of the party members that you meet are supposed to hate Joseph for various reasons as they meet him, and then gradually grow to like him. There are a few points where you get to stop and talk to your party members throughout the story. I wish they did this more often and had more in-depth dialogue for it, because I feel like they really didn't do a very good job of conveying the relationship dynamic of hatred and growing to accept Joseph. You get so much really good characterization for literally every key character in the story except for the main cast, and these tiny moments where you get to briefly talk to them are like salt in the wound. On the audio side of things, voice acting, when it was there, was pretty acceptable, and even sometimes pretty good in the case of Emperor Murad. However, Joseph's voice acting is pretty rough, and, you know, he's the main character. I feel like he should get the royalty treatment, right? The music never really stood out to me in particular, except in the old city in Lanell, where the criminals and poor people are, but that might be because there's not a lot to do there, and just a lot of walking around listening to the music. Summer is a game I approached with trepidation. While the art style looks a bit crusty and sometimes even cartoonish in the case of the deity murals, I really enjoyed the world building and the combat when it hit its highs. One of my favorite things about it is that most of the good gear comes from killing specific monsters or side quests. I feel like Summer has so much potential, but its scope and certain constraints got in the way of it being truly amazing. You can really tell the folks over at Volition really loved working on this game, but it's also rife with game-breaking bugs, insane frame chugging, and other technical limitations that really hurt the game. I love the story and world building and wish the game leaned on that more. I absolutely adore games where you need to remember where things are and listen to NPCs for direction rather than quest marker type gameplay that we get today. So Summoner was great in that regard. The combat was an absolute blast at its best and tedious and easy at its worst. The combat system doesn't need to change at all, but I feel like balancing and skill progression could use a little bit of tinkering. Would I recommend Summoner to my mother? Probably not, because she really only likes Mario and Crash Bandicoot. But would I recommend it to anyone else? It's really hard for me to do so. While I personally had trouble putting the game down because I was so engrossed in the world and the combat system, it's too buggy and janky for me to really recommend anyone put 24 hours into it. Definitely watch someone play it on YouTube at 1.5 times speed though. Thanks for watching. Yeah, so I was recording this whole time on my video, but you know, that didn't work because I'm like, how do you even look at the screen when you, you know, do things? So I just decided not to use it, and we'll try to get better at that because I do want to record my stuff. That would be cool. This is my shout out to the patrons. Anyone who gives me any money, I'm just like shocked at. I'm just like, yes, I love you, but like, why are you doing this? But I really appreciate it. Any money that is used, it goes towards games and equipment and whatnot to make these videos better. I bought a ring light to make a video setup and a couple of games as well that I'll be reviewing further on. If you'd like to support my channel at all, you can do so at patreon.com/reps2gog. There are a couple roles there. You can get access to the Discord. Actually, the Discord is free, but like you get like a special colored role. I don't know. Also, your names have been showing up here, the patrons, somewhere. I don't know where it's going to be, but you can also get that. I really appreciate everyone who supports me. The Discord, as I said, it's free, so get in that. There are people talking. Someone's playing like Phantasy Star or something, like the original Phantasy Star game, and they're like talking about it. It's like sick. Twitter, I don't post about Reps2gog very often. It's mostly like if I'm like sad and need to like be like, oh, why don't I have the video out yet? You know, that kind of thing on Twitter, or just me like posting some like shit I thought was funny. So there's that. Check that out. All that stuff. Check it all out. Cheers to you all and everything you do.